Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Monday, February 2nd. You could probably tell already I am still under the weather, trying to recover from just overexerting myself, I think is the best way to explain it. And over this whole winter storm, which according to Punxsutawney Phil, if you're going to believe a groundhog, 6 more weeks of winter are expected. Although I kind of feel like the determination as to whether he sees his shadow or not is actually based on more science than you might think, and they just say he sees his shadow versus they say he doesn't, not whether there actually is a shadow or not at the time that they pull him out of his box. But yeah, who cares about that? I'm gonna just jump straight into going through everything. We've got our SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent chart here. Seems like things are still pretty much the same. I'm starting a little bit later because I did go out and get the important documents I needed notarized, and that ended up taking longer than I thought it was going to. So now I just have to submit these forms and pray they're not rejected by the government, which is always a possibility. Yeah, pretty much over the weekend. I'm still waiting for a new battery backup, so I'm not doing anything on my computer. The reason why in the last stream the ads were popping up is because the power went out briefly at my house. My new hard drive enclosure that I plug a hard drive into my router to run the ad blocking software and other software does not automatically power back on, so the power was off, thus my ad blocking software was not running, and that was the reason. So that should be fixed now. Ironically, a pop-up that just said ad turned out to be the thing that YouTube's thumbnail detection tool decided was the most important part of a 2.5 hour plus live stream, and made that the thumbnail, which really speaks to a level of just how trained their thumbnail detection tool is in line with running ads, and that it prefers ads that it sees over anything else. It prefers the word ad. It prefers a white wall of nothing else but something that says ad. That was the most wishlisted games, that we just scrolled it back. Yeah, I think the creator of the original Heroes of Might and Magic games, and Might and Magic games in general, might be working on this new Heroes of Might and Magic, and that might be what's getting people a little bit more excited about it. So yeah, I have not been playing any games, haven't been scheduling any videos or anything like that. I've just been mostly lying in bed sick and coughing, and you're just going to hear me coughing a lot. I did clear a path to the table where I was going to put the 3D printer, there. Still haven't cleaned it, still haven't done anything to it, but I did put the brand new filament dryer and a brand new spool of filament next to it and set it drying, which it's PLA plus, and it's got like 2 more hours of drying in it, and it almost certainly didn't need to be dried because I literally just opened it up from a vacuum sealed bag. And PLA plus probably doesn't need to be dried anyways. So the thing I'm doing here is really just testing that the dryer actually does dry and that it can work as a dry box. But unless I really focused on it, I don't think I'm gonna get the 3D printer up and going It's wobbling on the table at the moment, so I'm gonna have to figure out just how to get this feet to start with to be level. The table itself might be a little wobbly, and then the printer base also has to be level, and everything just needs to be done. Seems like I can just clean everything with alcohol. Perhaps it's not the best idea to use isopropyl alcohol to clean the belts, but it seems like for 3D printers that's generally the thought. It doesn't seem like this 3D printer, which I still have yet to figure out what model it is. It's a Neptune Elgo something, as far as I can guess. But yeah, it looks like it might have been modified, maybe not. But it doesn't seem like it has self-leveling on it. So in that, there is a small thought that a 3D printer like this might be a good starter printer for maybe a year at most, and then the best move would be to get even a $200 cheap model that's just newer that would have auto self-leveling on the base. But by that point, if I really have figured out a way to do something with the 3D printing, particularly if I can figure out some way to make some money with it, that would be great. Then I probably would want something that could change and switch nozzles to 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 colors. 4 colors really would be a pretty good sweet spot. And I definitely have seen an open source project of just trying to add 6 or 7 nozzle changes for different colors, which seems like a little bit too much, really. If you could get it to change between even 2 colors, that would be probably a good start, and then getting a second printer that would also print between 2 colors would be a fairly good start, because most of the times when you are switching between colors, you're also probably making parts that could be glued in or snapped in anyways. You're not going to get a deep mix of different colors in 3D printing, very likely, whereas a enamel printer, which is the newest of the technologies I've seen lately, definitely does seem like you could get a deep comic book pointillized style of mixing of colors. But yeah, it would be cool if somehow I got a burst of energy and got really lucky and cleaned it all up, tightened all the belts, and actually was printing the beginnings of whatever test prints are built into it, and then probably a Bodhi. Test print. After I do all the test prints though, that's when I'm gonna have to think about what my first real design and print is, and then that might take a lot of time to find and start designing something, and I probably would start printing somebody else's design at first, while buying time to make any 3D designs of my own, or mix and match existing designs into something that I would like. Of course, none of that really has anything to do with video games, so yeah, I'm still waiting for my battery backup, and then I think I'll probably play Resident Evil 2. I think that makes a lot of sense, certainly, is to just go ahead and play Resident Evil 2 and make some progress there. Because I haven't been playing any video games, I've been watching a lot of streaming. I finished the Wandering Witch Elena anime series on Hulu. Absolutely awful series. Just all over the place with its themes and really just not telling an interesting story. Every episode is pretty much separate from every other episode, and yeah, it's just not a not a great way to tell a travel adventure story. And part of the problem there is you started with a character that was effectively perfect and invulnerable to begin with, so there wasn't any real struggles there. It's not really worth watching, but if you were going to compare it to some of the Ghibli movies, like Howl's Moving Castle might be a great one. It would be a great contrast in the to show like how much struggle and story and world building is just really great in some of the Ghibli movies compared to Lane the Witch, which is just really awful and takes a lot longer to tell that story. I was watching a British comedy panel show called Unforgivable. I saw all of those episodes. Watched a pretty terrible movie called Never Blink that turned out to be an SCP inspired movie, although frankly it felt really low budget, and I half wonder if it was actually originally part of some kind of like Halloween horror night event somewhere, that they reused the footage to make a movie out of it. I tried to watch Ranma 1/2 on Prime, and there's like a free version of it and a non-free version with your basic Prime subscription, and the free version is the subtitled version, which, yeah, particularly for a long-running series like Ranma 1/2, where the dialogue is rather important and you need to follow it, while also not being so deep that you need to actually read it. It's hard to recommend watching the subtitle of Ranma 1/2 unless you're just a huge subtitle fan to begin with. So yeah, there was a Paranormal Activity parody movie I watched called Paranormal Whacktivity, which did a terrible job of parodying horror movies, and was really just a dumb, crude, like teenage college sex comedy type movie. Not really funny enough at any one point. And frankly, not dirty enough at all either, for what you would think it would be. You see a lot more man butt than you do a single character showing boobs in one scene, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's not even delivering on what it is promising. What else did I watch? I've been watching a lot of hoarder flipper houses on Hulu shows, and they really don't touch on the hoarding aspect of the houses at all. They buy these hoarder houses, then they exploit their friends and family for free to clean out the houses. They find something of value that's probably planted, or they lie about its value and sell it to make maybe a couple $100, and then it's just a regular house flipping show once they've done the clean out. So they spend like the first 5 minutes in the hoarding aspect, and the hoarding aspect almost never changes the state of the house. Like, if these hoarder houses had just been regular houses, they would have potentially had the exact same problems as far as being flipped. And the thing about flipping houses, these house flips that they do on TV, is that they very much are just trying to do the surface level stuff. They're not looking to see if there's asbestos in the walls or lead in the pipes. They're not looking for if the electric is anywhere close to being safe, or let alone up to code. They're not looking to see if the roof has any potential problems that could be cut off at the pass. They just want to get it close enough that they can get some home inspector to sign off on it, and home inspectors will sign off on a lot of stuff that they probably shouldn't, to sell the problem to the next people. And inherently, a flipper of a house is just not sticking with a house for a long haul, so they're just in it for the short term, not to benefit the entire community by improving or maintaining the house for the long term. Which, yeah, there arguably should be some kind of early exit tax if you buy a house and then sell it within, say, 12 months of buying a house first time. That would be enough to dissuade most house flippers, but not the big ones. But yeah, there are similar laws in most countries where a house being empty is usually taxed more than a house being used. Am I watching anything else as far as just talking about what I've been doing instead of being a video game critic? Well, not that I recall, so there must not have been anything else. We do have the new gacha charts here, with one game in particular falling below 10,000, and I think it might have been Honkai Star Rail falling down pretty far with its latest update, so that was, I think, a big upset. Pokemon TCG Pockets got its new thing going on, and I'm playing that and trying to get the newest cards and trying to slowly fill in the gaps of the older cards I don't have, doing all the solo things. In particular, since I'm sitting around, I'm probably playing more of that than normal. I even tried for a brief second to do a Sudoku, so I may fall back into doing Sudokus, but I hope not. And then Memento Mori's got an event going on, and so I'm playing that. And then in a couple days, another new event is going to be going on. It does seem like we've got a fairly large amount of reds starting about the 27th spot. So it does seem like overall the games are making less and less money, and it certainly is concerning to see Memento Mori fall down 8 spots and lose an estimated $1 million in revenue this month. Once they start to fall about at the million in the past, that has felt like that was the time they start giving up on them, and they stop adding content to them, which most of these gacha games fall apart the second they stop adding content to them. So this may very well be a case where we aren't but maybe a year or two away from me getting almost all the characters in Memento Mori, and then Memento Mori shutting down, which would exactly be similar to my experience with Shift Up's first game, Destiny's Child. Although in that case, Destiny's Child had a lot more characters than Memento Mori does. And we've got some really low amounts of revenue here. in some of these games. Some of these games may very well be easy enough to leave running, though. That is the other possibility. And the relative amount of money may not matter as much. Certainly there is also a level of pride for some of these games, so things from Bandai like One Piece and Ambition in particular might stay around longer just because it has One Piece's name in it. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel's not going to go anywhere even if it stops making any money until they come out with a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. Hardware survey, I guess for January, might be out now that we're in February. But kind of at this point I've stopped really caring too much about the hardware surveys too much. I've definitely stopped caring about that chart. I still haven't played any games, so this unreleased beta test for Slopeside Kings, I haven't jumped in there and played that. That's I need to remind myself to do that. Yeah, I just need to find a good time that I'm willing to sit in a chair and instead of lay down and feel sick. I don't know if there's still time to buy the original version of Final Fantasy VII. Before they release the 2013 version of Final Fantasy VII, which I don't know if it really matters one way or the other. I heard they decompiled Banjo-Kazooie, so that's yet another pretty big that's another pretty big Nintendo 64 game that they are now it is now a thing where you can actually play it on PC with improved controls and you'll know why these pictures aren't loading, and just improved performance. Yeah, DF Retro talked about it a little bit. When things really don't want to load. This is not in my library. So Final Fantasy VII. Probably should grab it. And nothing wants to work. I opened up Wicked Seed here. This is a game that, well, is somewhat of an asset flip game with a sexy lady in a Resident Evil inspired style experience. I saw a reviewer that I kind of trust talk about how there actually is kind of a game here. And so it is interesting, certainly, to see that this is 92% positive of 412 user reviews, and that there is just a level of enthusiasm there, I would say. Why am I dropping frames? Like crazy. Something is going wrong here, and I don't know what it is. And I probably am not going to be able to figure it out. Probably it's just a case that the whole Firefox needs to be reset. So yeah, there's some polish that seems like needs to be added to Wicked Seed, but it does weirdly point out that even now the kinda asset flippy put a sexy lady in a game trope is possibly an avenue to make a game that is good enough that people are actually willing to stick with it and actually willing to say it's a good game. And I think some of that definitely comes down to the censorship in the mainstream games, is that if this was Lara Croft in a horror game, which is kind of crazy that they haven't just tried to put Lara Croft in a horror game and it was just slightly skimpy tops and hot pants, that would siphon off some of the audience for something like Wicked Seed. It also feels like this game isn't really towing the line in that there are costumes and cosmetics that are maybe a little bit lewd in the game, but I don't think there are actually any sequences in the game, any dialogue, any cutscenes that are lewd. So at any point, this is kind of a game where you could take out certain costumes or choose to not play the costumes and you'd be perfectly fine. But yeah, this is one of the things that the reviewer talked about, is that you end up staggering these enemies and then you have to do just a lot of damage to them, and things carry over from one playthrough to the next playthrough. So maybe playing it on easy, you'd be powered up enough on the second run to do a second run on a harder difficulty, things like that. We don't see any refurbs for sale. I don't think we are going to see any refurbs for sale. Megabonk is still being played quite a bit. Cult of the Lamb feels like it's being played quite a bit. Yeah, it is interesting. I have had no interest to go back and play Belairtro or Vampire Survivors, two games I bought relatively new at a high price to make footage that will not even air anytime close to their launches, and to enjoy them less than some of the older games that I've bought at much deeper discounts. And yet the real game I want to play is Blueprints, and that wasn't discounted enough. So I feel like I probably do have just some poor decision making that seems to happen here, in that sometimes these games are being picked in the wrong order. Yeah. Alright, moving on, let's go through the Video Games Chronicle headlines. Let's see. The anime-inspired Star Sand Island enters early access on Steam and Xbox next week. I think this is the one with the two girls farming together. Yep. So yeah, I don't know how anime inspired that is, considering there really haven't been that many animes where you do a lot of farming or anything like Stardew Valley. I guess there's been a couple of recent ones where you do farming. Very recent. I can think of like one anime show but it's nothing like that game. So it's probably more accurate to say it's just a Stardew Valley inspired game with anime aesthetics. Might be better. We may have already seen this headline. Numerous video game share prices dropped following Google's Project Genie AI rollout. Unity CEO made a statement after the tool, which lets users create playable worlds, saw its shares crashing 35%. Google also is adding another AI centered editor for making shorts and videos called Nano Banana, which probably won't do too much other than like erase backgrounds at most. Speaking of backgrounds, that might be where this 3D printer in a year or two might be best utilized as a background prop if I were to buy a more expensive one. But you know, I think I could probably figure out. I mean, I could possibly even turn it into like a 3D scanner. I've got some ideas there where if the whole extrusion part was ignored and the base plate was changed into a rotating base plate, I could see it. Well, I don't know why you would even need to include the 3D printing arm then at that point. Unless the camera was attached to it. Yep, I'll have to think about that more to see if that was is a real thought or if I'm just thinking out loud nonsense. Honestly, seeing these price shares drop is really just showing the ridiculousness of the stock market, because nothing Google announces is really to be trusted, and Google is not going to be able to release this AI nonsense. And then all of a sudden, the quality of a game made by CD Projekt or Roblox or Take-Two or a game made in Unity is going to drop significantly. Now, if we want to make an argument that Unity's share prices should be 31% lower than they were before, sure. There's lots of reasons for that. The AI Gemini is not one of them. If you want to make the argument that Nintendo's share prices should be lower, sure. Plenty of arguments there can be made too. If you want to say that CD Projekt Red's share prices should be lower because they're putting too much into their next big game and they're risking a lot, sure. But yeah, Project Genie is going to be like so many other of Google's projects where it comes out as a sales pitch and then delivers basically nothing. Moving on, the UK retailer Game is closing its remaining standalone stores after entering admission. Game will now operate entirely within Sports Directive and House of Fraser, which I assume are two other retailers, which at a certain level, video game companies probably should be inside larger supermarket, department store style businesses. Even in the United States, it really doesn't make a lot of sense that a GameStop is separate from being inside a Target or a Walmart, or even if GameStops were just inside of, say, like Dollar Generals or something, some like really low-end franchise store, or even non-franchise stores. It would make a lot of sense. It kind of even makes sense that GameStops could be inside McDonald's. Two different things being sold there, certainly, but not really that crazy of a thought. Replace all those playgrounds with GameStops, and then expect that the GameStops will sell very few games and just be there for kids to wander around. And in most cases, kids are getting their food picked up in the drive-thru anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Let's see. Moving on, the Super Mario Melody just won a Grammy Award. Super Mario Arrangement and Austin Wintory were the big video game winners at the Grammys. I don't know what Austin Wintory was. Yeah. So I assume these are songs that were played in the movie. That would be my guess. Otherwise, seems like 8-Bit Band here somehow just was able to do different arrangements for Mario games. Yeah. See, I don't know if these songs were in the movie or not. And if these are not from the movie, then where are these songs from? The original games? That doesn't make any sense. Unless the Grammys here, not the BAFTAs, are just trying to catch up and give Grammys to very old music. Very old video game music in particular, I would suspect. Yeah. Do I think the Grammys are really that relevant? No. Do I think they become more relevant by adding video games? Maybe. That's probably a bad thing, though. Weirdly, you have an example here of the 8-Bit Big Band game. It being a 30-member jazz orchestra based mostly in New York City, getting an award, and a Austin Wintory author, composer, getting an award, when almost certainly this music was not originally written by those people, not the original creators. Probably didn't even get credit from Nintendo of Japan, let alone any kind of awards. Like, that's basically all I can speculate, so I'll just move on there. A PS5 console exclusive Neo 3 could appear on other systems as soon as August. The game has a 6-month exclusivity window, says Sony. So, I assume the game is not out yet. They are kind of telling you you could probably wait it out. The Switch version of Apex Legends will shut down this summer. Players will have to upgrade to the Switch 2 version to keep their currency. Respawn says that sounds exploitative, to say the least. Maybe you could spend the currency before then, but I'm not sure what you could spend the currency on that would be anything you could actually keep if the Switch version is being shut down. Yep. And I hope this isn't the beginning of a precedent where we just see Switch 1 versions of games literally just forcing people to buy Switch 2 and Switch 2 versions of those games. Let's see. Sony has patented a touchscreen PlayStation controller that lets players choose where to put the buttons. Standard controllers aren't comfortable for everyone, Sony says. It's interesting how this kind of feels like this might be an accessibility thing, but it's important to point out that they have pretty much abandoned their latest accessibility controller to the point where I've seen them on sale for like $30 when I think they were $250 before, and there's just no way to set up and program the Sony accessibility controllers without a PlayStation, which means you basically have to have a $400 accessory to use an accessibility controller on a computer. So yeah, I wouldn't trust anything Sony does here is actually for the good of society. I would trust this as some kind of scheme to just sell something new and design something new, or just be a patent troll and create a patent that works for them and against everyone else. At some level, this arguably means only certain elements of this could be patented, and the exact layout of buttons might not be able to be patented. And certainly in games you could see where it would start to make sense for there to be all kinds of different buttons popping up based on the game you're using, and there being a lot more buttons. But you're just not getting any physical feedback on any of that at all. There was a technology that they were pushing a few years ago, and I don't think it ever really worked, where there were going to be inflatable ballasts under a device, and buttons would just magically appear out of nowhere, and that the physical device itself could reconfigure itself. And at a certain level, why a touchscreen, other than the fact that Sony wants a touchscreen there, it would make a lot more sense to have some kind of Lego system, something like a Lego system at least, where you could move components around and build your own controller. Which, yeah, arguably you could have custom shoes made for every single human on the planet, and they might be slightly more comfortable, or you could figure out the instep and the instep I think is pants, but the insole and the outsole and the toe and the heel and the arch. And once you get those general measurements for a shoe, you know how to make a shoe that will work for most people and what to adjust to make a shoe work better for other people. I could see how there might be a distance to the edge where if you could just slightly add spacers on one angle here, or one angle here, or one angle here, or here, or here, you could slightly move things in one direction or another for each component. But touchscreen really seems like it is kind of silly. Yeah. And this very much feels like it's a jack of all trades, master of none, because if one person loves the controller like this, some kid with small hands, well, they're just not going to be using the touchscreen components here at all. And if somebody loves it way up here because they have big hands, then they're likely not doing anything here. Take note, they've actively gone out of their way to show an interface that is very simplistic, with just a D-pad and 2 buttons, which is not something Sony consoles have ever had. Even the PCP, portable, PlayStation Portable, the Vita, all of those have had 4 buttons at the minimum. PlayStation 1. Moving on. We have a quote here. It certainly seems that way. Season 3 of Last of Us could be its last. HBO boss hints. HBO's boss says it seems The Last of Us will end with Season 3. Honestly, I feel like TV shows should probably just assume they're going to end at Season 3 and not try and stretch it out. There's only 2 Last of Us games, and frankly, I don't think they really want people to tell the story, most of the story in The Last of Us Part 2, which leads them down to really just one game before they have to start making up a different story completely. Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, sure, in the old days, you wanted 5 seasons, 100 episodes to go into syndication, but syndication now is really much smaller than that, and 3 seasons can easily get you into syndication. A lot of these HBO shows don't have to care about syndication because they'll just be rerun on HBO, even if they and they won't try to get them syndicated to other channels. And yeah, HBO streaming services can just sit on something like this forever. So yeah, I don't know at what point of the story in the TV show they are in compared to the game, but I imagine they could wrap it up fairly easily. And they could certainly wrap it up very quickly by just changing the ending drastically. The biggest thing they could do is just like kill off Abby as a character, and then that would be a very different ending. There are several video game inspired movies I've seen on Prime Video as I was just looking around, and yeah, as I'm sitting around being sick, I may try and watch some of them. They're all going to be awful, like the Warcraft movie, and really irrelevant though, so I know I'm just setting myself up in a way to waste a couple hours. WWE 2K26 release date, additions, new match types, ringside pass system, showcase mode, and pre-order bonuses have been revealed. I didn't think this guy was still wrestling, and boy does he look old. I heard some people who actually still follow wrestling say they generally are unhappy with the most recent events in wrestling, which, well, that is fairly common. It does really feel like it's just getting worse and worse. Roman Reigns, I believe, is back in the spotlight as being one of the main characters they're trying to prop up, and people, I do not believe, like Roman Reigns, and I don't think they would ever like Roman Reigns, to the point where they probably should just make Roman Reigns in charge, the new Vince McMahon replacement type character, at least storyline wise, and have him call and make a whole bunch of horrible matches that people hate but love to hate because they hate him. It is ironic where wrestling might be one of the places where the more hated you are, the higher up in the fictional management architecture of WWE you can go. Whereas if you're liked, you're not going to be in charge for very long, if at all. Let's see. Nintendo has commented on Dispatch's Nintendo Switch 2 censorships. All the other versions of the game feature optional censorship, however it can't be turned off on Nintendo platforms. It's also worth pointing out that it is my understanding that there was just some self-censorship and content that they left on the cutting room floor that you cannot see because they didn't put it in the game, the developers of the game, in it being advised by the publishers of the game. So yeah, let's see if they say anything particularly interesting here. It's going to be a boilerplate response. Nintendo requires all games on its platforms to receive ratings from independent organizations and to meet established content and platform guidelines. While we inform partners when their titles don't meet our guidelines, Nintendo does not make changes to partner content. We also do not discuss specific content or the criteria used to make these determinations. This is the MPAA playbook as far as how the film ratings group also does it. And it is slightly disingenuous because what they're really talking about in the case of the United States and the West is the ESRB, which Nintendo is one of the major members of the ESRB. So Nintendo is definitely directly reviewing games and giving them ratings. And notably, had Dispatch left all of that content in and made a infant-mature or adults only rated ESRB game, Nintendo would almost certainly have not published it. It is perhaps the first statement we will see from Nintendo. I assume that this is a Nintendo of America statement, not actually Nintendo of Japan, although it might be a Nintendo of Japan statement, and I guess the sentiment is the same. This might be the first statement as far as the new people in charge as to how they're going to handle things, and it seems very much like they're going to handle things the way they've always handled things. Whether this is a statement from Nintendo of Japan with the new president being in charge, or whether it's a statement from Nintendo of America with the new lady being in charge of Nintendo of America. There is maybe higher standards for CRO rating games. Where yeah, CRO may be even tighter in Japan as far as the ratings board. And then we already heard that the UK retailer game looks to be entering administration, or we already heard it already has entered administration. And it looks like we've probably not got any new Gematsu articles, which I find questionable. Let's run back over here and see why that would be the case. Reload this page. That's going to take forever. Maybe we'll alright, so that and I don't know how many of these other things really be new. You can see this is probably where my computer got slowed down. Okay. 3 days ago probably means I've seen the article. Of course, now this is all just going to take forever to open up. So what do we do now? Stretch for time. Find something to fill. You can see the frames per second are dropping rapidly here as this is going on. So yeah, Is there anything else to talk about here? Yeah, I am getting increasingly interested in the thought that of what a Resident Evil in Godot would look like. Like, there's still a lot of types of games that just as a here's a tutorial, here's a demo of what this would look like making this in Godot, would take a lot more steps and a lot more work and a lot more thought to do even a very simplistic vertical slice of what a game like that would be. Resident Evil, kind of a great example, because first steps first is you would have to have just 3D models for characters to begin with, and then you'd have to have an aiming system and a gun pointing system that maybe is built in, maybe isn't. You'd have to work on either a 3D tiling system or some other way to design entire levels and models. I have wondered why the frame rates are dropping isn't the fact that I unplugged my third monitor as I was moving monitors around. Didn't need that third monitor plugged in anymore. And I can't help but wonder if maybe doing that changed something in OBS. Yeah, if you were going to make a very basic Resident Evil 1 type game, which really you're better off shooting for something like a very basic Resident Evil 4 type game. It's just going to have to be a lot of cinematic scripting that goes on there as far as enemies appearing in certain places and attacking in certain ways. One of the things that most of the tutorials don't get deep into is to have the enemies actually have a certain level of state machines associated with them, and I don't know if other engines really call them state machines or if it's something different, but yeah, if you have an enemy that doesn't really have a state machine associated with it or enough state machines associated with it, it's going to just target you and walk in the same style, the same path over and over again to attack you, and it's going to become incredibly repetitive and incredibly grindy. Whereas you look at Resident Evil 4 and you have zombies that get shot in the head attacking in a completely different way, or zombies getting shot in the leg getting staggered, or zombies at half health attacking in a different way, or zombies that are a couple steps away from you rushing you and attacking you in a different way. Lots of different states there, different types of zombies attacking in different ways, and without a lot of that embedded behavior, you will, again, just killing time here as these all load up, which this has opened way more than I thought it was going to. Yeah, with your basic behavior in most programming, if you don't have state machines, you're really going to have something like a Vampire Survivors type game, where enemies literally are programmed to run towards you, and they will bump into each other and move each other around a little bit, but that's the level of their intelligence. There isn't a single enemy that I saw in Vampire Survivors, as far as I recall, that would try to flank you, or that would sometimes randomly move to the left a little bit, or move to the right a little bit. And for a game like Vampire Survivors, where you have hundreds upon hundreds of enemies on the screen potentially, that makes sense. But for most other games, it doesn't make sense. You're expecting there to be some level of AI in your game, and by that we mean actual artificial intelligence, not large language module AI, which is what they're calling AI now. Which, even when we called it AI in the past, it really was more just procedural generated actions. What's funny there is we've gone through all the Video Games Chronicle articles, and we didn't see anything from the State of Azeroth announcement or any of those Blizzard announcements. So either that didn't happen, or what was announced was so irrelevant that Video Games Chronicles didn't even bother to talk about it. Which that is fairly wild. Alright, so now we're going to pretend like we can go through all the Gematsu articles. A lot of this is going to be showing me, I think, games at random. Some of these arcade style games. Question if there could be a resurgence in these kinds of arcade style games. The people that actually care. Here we can see Tekken 8, which was released in 2024, is mixed. No telling why a lot of this stuff is open. Here we have the WWE 2K26. Let's see, Demon Kill Demon Yomi 1984 teaser trailer. Okay. I'm just going to try and save some time here, because we're having a bad frames per second day. And I imagine that means even the recording is going to be pretty bad and choppy. So let's not watch the trailer. Let's see, this week's Japanese game releases: Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, Neo 3, My Hero Academia All Justice, and more. Let's see. List here. Let's see. I thought I just closed the tab, and yet the tab is still open. Alright. Try that again. Okay, Falcom's unannounced game for 2026 is going to be revealed in February. I feel like that's an announcement for an announcement. We have something from 2024 that looks interesting. The white cutout definitely gives a different style to it. Yeah, I definitely wonder if when you're making a smaller game like this one seems to be, if it wouldn't make a lot of sense to do everything in your power to stay out of a bigger open world area and have more cutscenes and dialogue to take up a significant chunk of the game's experience. Here's Star Sand Island, it's not out yet. Resident Evil Requiem. Star Sand Island launches in early access. Paladins for PS4 and 5 and Switch launches February 20th. So it's already on PC. Let's see. Let's just go back some more. Apex Legends for Switch in service on August 4th. These are stories we talked about. So maybe these were stories we already even covered from Gematsu and they were just in the wrong place. I suppose that's possible. Trails of the Sky second chapter has another trailer on Gematsu. Taken's 8 Season 3 DLC characters announced. These pages just don't seem like they really want to go away. Yeah, RAM seems like it is full. Maybe we just have duplicate tabs all over the place. That might also be the case. WWE 2K26 was just announced. I saw a video of somebody talking about EA's lost, forgotten games. Perhaps forgotten is the better way to describe it. Just things that EA published at one time in its long history and now no longer publishes them. And really it was just an excuse, it felt like, for the YouTuber to talk about American McGee's Alice, which, in fairness, I don't hold that against them, because I do think more people should be talking about American McGee's Alice and wanting more from that series, or more games like it. But all the other games in the series really were rather forgettable in contrast to American McGee's Alice. And it is my understanding that if you own American McGee's Alice Returns, there's a little hack you do, and you can then play the original game. But there is no way to officially buy and launch the original game, which probably would be a while before there was any kind of decompilation effort for something like that. Some of those older PCs, things could be emulated, but decompiling, recompiling, it's probably years away. Zenless Zone Zero version 2.6 update Encore for the Old Dream launches February 6. Yep. That's probably what that story was about. People of Note adds a Switch 2 version, and the voice cast has been announced, if you're interested in that. Just trying to close as many tabs as possible. We've already got a check mark next to it, which tells me I've already shown it off, or pretended at least like I made a YouTube short on it. Reality is I haven't made YouTube shorts in a long time, and it's just not something I think I'm going to focus on. Although, being sick, I probably could focus on it more if I was not actually sick. If only I could find a way to be slightly less sick. Too sick to talk, but not so sick that I couldn't sit in a chair for an extra couple hours. Trying to just close a lot of these tabs, which seem to really not want to go away. M2's Tokihiro Naoto and Skipmore announced a pixel art puzzle adventure shooter Z Grader Plus for PC. So that is a lot of a description. Okay, so back to the Resident Evil trailer. It says Evil always had a name. It's not a trailer, it's a short film. And it looks to me like it's fully live action. Which, yeah, when you see something like this, which I don't know why I'm even trying to watch this with the frame rate drops going the way they are. There's, I mean, just not really going to be a connection to the actual game. So, yeah, you see a girl, you see a mother who's been cast to look as young as possible, and frankly, looks a little too good and a little too young for a girl of that age. So you have to assume one of the two people are going to end up dead, if not both. Apparently they were in Raccoon City. The girl's over there in the corner, but there's a zombie, I think, like almost directly to the left of where she was. Nope, I guess not. I thought I saw someone standing in the background. What's funny is this is kind of a nod to the original full motion video cutscenes of the first Resident Evil game, but I just don't see a real reason why you would want to make that nod. If anything, this may just speak to there being too big of a budget for Resident Evil Requiem and them wasting their money on a short film like this. Would it help anything if these short films got made more often and there were like awards given out, little Emmys and Tonys and things like that? Not Tonys, but Emmys and Oscars. I guess it would be an Oscar as a short film. I don't think it really would. And what's particularly weird about this short film is that this is just not going to, I think, really connect to the characters in Requiem. I don't think it would, at least. If anything, this feels like this is just a backdoor pilot attempt to either making like a TV series or yet another TV series or yet another movie series. You know, it's funny, this game has been called Resident Evil Requiem, but I have not put any thought into the fact that the name has Requiem in the name. So yeah, a Requiem, unless I am completely mistaken, is a song for a deceased person. Not song, it's a mass for a deceased person. It says a mass for a deceased person, a musical composition for such a mass, a hymn, composition, or service for the dead. So all of those are basically the same meaning, and it's being added to Resident Evil, which on the face of it you could see where the title might imply it's for a character in the game being dead. But what if it isn't actually to imply that the Resident Evil series, in its current timeline, in its current plot, is coming to an end, and this is the last game for the series. It wouldn't be the craziest idea in the world, frankly. If they ended the current timeline Resident Evil games, they could say the reboots are actually a different timeline and continue to make remakes and reboots of the Resident Evil games. They do want to remake, which honestly I don't know if they really want to remake or reboot any more of the games anyways. They don't likely want to make 5 or 6 or remake 7, 8, or 9 again anytime soon. So why not just reboot the series, have a new Resident Evil, not set in Raccoon City or set in a different Raccoon City, and say the timeline is completely different here, completely different characters, make a completely different game, call it Resident Evil. I wouldn't be surprised if that thought is at least being considered. Every Resident Evil game for a long time now have given indications that it could very well have gone too far with the power creep and with the intensity of the stories, that they really can't take the story much further. And frankly, by Resident Evil 6, they probably should have rebooted the series. Even by the end of Resident Evil 4, they could have rebooted the series. Now that reboots are way more digestible, it wouldn't be the craziest thought. Certainly you could do that in TV form or movie form too, to tell a completely different story, but I think Capcom definitely wants to continue to make games called Resident Evil. And at a certain level, I think people would be fine with playing games called Resident Evil. They play like Resident Evil games, but just tell different stories in different universes. Alright, so I think we are at the Gaming on Linux articles now. Let's see, a story-heavily tactical CRPG, Atom RPG 2 has been announced. CRPG stands for what? Character RPG or classic RPG? I don't know what the C stands for. It's not coming to mind. Looking at this screenshot here, though, let's see if we can get this video to play. I mean, it's kind of what I would like to see something like a Fallout 1 remake start at. It could be a lot better than that, but it wouldn't be terrible if it looked like that. Although there's really very little reason in modern times for a game to be even slightly low polygon. It's just too easy to start with better assets, even if you didn't make the assets yourself. I don't know how hard it really would be to potentially recreate or remake Fallout 1 with just available pre-made assets in a game. Now the screenshots we're seeing here seem fairly different from what the trailer was showing. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, put it on the follow list, pretend to make a YouTube short on it, then try and move further ahead. You can upgrade your theme park as OpenRTC, not RTC, but RCT2 updates just as a new Humble Bundle drops. Roller Coaster Tycoon games. Those were fairly big games back in the day. Not sure I ever spent too much time on it. The new TerraTech Legion trailer has me itching to play. That is, Gaming on Linux is itching to play. obviously have me itching to play because I didn't bother to put it on the follow list. Although basically at this point I'm putting everything on the follow list if I see it mentioned twice. Bashimoto is an upcoming 90s themed beat 'em up motorcycle racing game, which I'm not sure there's been more than one game where that ever was really good. There's a couple that did it. I know if I can think of two games where you're on a motorcycle and you're beating each other up as you race around, but one is just a sequence in full throttle and it's pretty bad, and the other is a game I cannot remember the name of. That's, I guess, pretty much all I can say about that. Maybe there are several other games that I just don't know about, which is frankly true for any case. It's been a while since we've had a upgrade to the ScumVM version 2026.1.0 is a huge new release with tons of new supported games. Feels like that might also be a new numbering system. But yeah, if you were to ignore the 2026 here, this is a 1.0 release, which frankly I imagine ScumVM has been at a 1.0 release for the games that supported up until this point and has long since really been working on just supporting more games. Let's see. The main thing here is they're adding specific engines to run a lot of old games. A lot of old point and click games were built by the same companies using the same engines. So yeah, 12 new gaming engines were added. And thanks to just 2 of them, there are now 194 new games supported. So this list here feels like it is a small pittance of what it should be. And things like Pilot Brothers, it doesn't feel like it's that old of a game. Nancy Drew doesn't feel like it's that old of a game either. At a certain point, it starts to be questionable whether ScumVM isn't really just emulating old versions of Windows as much as it is standing in as a API wrapper or emulator for old game engines. So yeah, significant upgrades to the Android, iOS, and Atari ports. I want this blog to open, but apparently I cannot find a link to open them. So what I'm going to do is drag this tab around. Apparently accomplish nothing in that. At the last second, I did start to respond. They're apparently also planning on more frequent releases because it has been fairly quiet, and I imagine now with the number of new engines, there's going to be a lot of updating and fixing things. While we wait for that to load, we'll see that Valheim gets a big birthday update with optimizations, Steam Deck upgrades, and new content. Just does not want to load. Okay. I don't know where we ended up on this page for key mapper and text-to-speech support. It's nice and all, but it's not information that's particularly useful for me. A hardcore single-player survivor first-person shooter Road to Vostok arrives in April 7th. It feels like it's probably a joke game, but it apparently put out a press release, so it can't be that big of a joke. Maybe that one screenshot was more of a joke. I guess the question is, what's the difference between a survival game and a Resident Evil game? I would assume that survival games are designed to be just way more open-ended and more open world in its design, where Resident Evil really, I think, benefits way more by having its, there we go, see if we can maybe make this a little bit bigger without getting crazy with the sizing of things. There we go, 300 times the size. Following 200 pages in this category out of 563 pages, they mean links. So, yeah. A lot of these games definitely were supported before, but yeah, I would say a lot may be the wrong word at this point. Yeah. What's funny is we basically considered Scumbium, I personally consider Scumbium a very excellent emulator for the small handful of games it could support in the old days, and it's only gotten just better and better as far as the numbers of things it supports and how well it supports those things. Yeah, there was definitely a time too where I was going to try and match my Steam collection of games to Scumbium. It's questionable though a lot of times whether you actually need Scumbium outside of Steam, because the Steam version might very well be using the Scumbium anyways to run them. There is another interesting question to ask here, and we don't have an answer. It might be that a lot of these games actually fell out of copyright. We know that Nancy Drew as a character fell out of copyright, but her as a character was established in books probably decades before video games were really a thing, so the engines for certain games falling out of copyright probably has not happened, but at the beginning of 2026, and any copyright for any specific game probably hasn't happened. And this Scumbium only runs games that you have the files for, so they really don't skirt the law as far as copyright goes anyways. So yeah, that is a long list of really old games that maybe a lot of people don't really care about or know about. And if they were games that were on Steam, they would be old school point and click adventure type games, which I'm always happy to see when point and click adventure games try to have a resurgence, but I'm always saddened to see that they fail to gather a massive audience. The truth of the matter is, point and click adventure fans were gamers at one point, or at least a significant number of gamers were point and click adventure fans, enough that they would buy some and play them. But then gaming as a general thing just got bigger and bigger. It's the tragedy becoming mainstream, and I think that's has affected gaming a lot, is that as gaming became more and more popular, any one genre, any style of game became slightly less relevant as the whole big tent of gaming became bigger and bigger, and everything started to get a little bit blander and a little bit more like a mixed stew, less than a tossed salad. There's an analogy there. Everything just starts to become bland. But yeah, you certainly have a lot more first-person shooters than we did when point and clicks were in their heyday. Because back when their heyday happened, maybe you would have Doom and several Doom clones, but that would be it. Now, pretty much everything is a first-person shooter, and you just can't really make a point-and-click adventure game with a first-person shooter. Although it is an interesting challenge to throw out there, it would be very, very hard to do that. The closest you get is something like Alone in the Dark at most, which then even that evolved into something like Resident Evil, which then kind of evolves back into being more action with a few puzzles instead of being really interested in telling a story or having a lot of puzzles. Moving on, Team Fortress Classified, which was formerly Team Fortress 2 Classic, has launched on Steam. It's a mod for Valve Team Fortress 2's updated with refreshed visuals, new game modes, and more. So it seems like this is kind of a unofficial mod, which it seems like there's several of those. Is it free? Seems like it is. So I'll just go ahead and put it in my library and see if that works. Took forever. I won't know the Valve games, but I don't think I've ever actually played any of the Team Fortress games, nor do I suspect I ever would. Let's see, Raspberry Pi prices are rising again by up to $60. It's not a good time to be buying anything computer related right now, and the Raspberry Pi team just upped their prices for the second time recently. So, price increases here for the Raspberry Pi 4 and 5, along with the compute modules. So they are saying that the 1GB variant, which I think they just introduced, is staying the same, but the 2GB of RAM is going up by $10. The 4GB is going up by $15, which you're getting kind of an odd discount there. 8GB though is then going up by $30, which again you might be getting a bit of a discount, but not really. And it feels very obviously that they just kind of started where this has to be $10 and this has to be $60. 16GB of RAM, which I think is shared RAM on the Raspberry Pi for your video card and your well, not video card, but the video chip and the CPU. It's going up by $60. But yeah, that price is pretty ridiculous. That price is pretty ridiculous. that price is probably too expensive. Even that price is probably too expensive, because even before these price increases, Raspberry Pi has been too expensive. It's been too expensive for about a year prior to it being acquired by Motorola. Oh, actually, I think it was Arduino that was acquired by Motorola. Yeah, I don't think Raspberry Pi has been acquired by anybody. But yeah, they stopped trying to make an affordable PC at least a year and a half ago. And really, they stopped succeeding in making an affordable PC, system on chip type PC, probably 2 to 4 years ago anyways. There are better offerings than a Raspberry Pi to do basically anything now. You might get stuck if you just needed a computer that could run full Linux and do something really power intensive, where a Raspberry Pi might make some sense. But on one end you have a lot of ESP32 chips now that can do one thing and one thing very well, while still handling connecting to Wi-Fi and being Internet of Thing type devices. Or on the other hand, you have just used mini PCs that will cost slightly less at this point compared to what a Raspberry Pi would cost, and give you better performance and the ability to install and run Windows and run AMD 64 software instead of using software that you'd have to compile and build specifically for the Raspberry Pi. It feels like it's been at least 4 years since RetroPie has updated themselves, because that concept really plateaued. It could emulate the games it could emulate, and the Raspberry Pi was not going to get strong enough to emulate anything new or anything any better. The other projects like RetroPie, I don't feel like they've updated either. With the introduction of the Steam Deck, it makes a lot more sense to use EmuDeck and run emulations on a Steam Deck, even if it feels like it's going to be slightly more of a first step investment to buy a Steam Deck. You also get to play a lot of modern games, which a Raspberry Pi won't let you play any modern games. But yeah, if you're into emulation, EmuDeck and a Steam Deck is the way to go nowadays. And with Steam Machine coming out, I imagine we'll see a EmuDeck variant for the Steam machines. It'll work very well for emulating basically anything. And so that'll be another nail in the coffin for the Raspberry Pi. And it's kind of a shame, but it's not really a big shame, because it's been years since I've seen anybody have an interesting project idea for the Raspberry Pi. In fact, it would have died on the vine if it weren't for RetroPie years ago. That was the only thing that most people were getting excited about. So yeah. Moving on. The Steam survey for January 2026 shows a small drop for Linux and Mac OS. I imagine this is just more people getting new PCs or moving to Windows 11, being forced to move to Windows 11. Hopefully this isn't an indication that a significant enough of people went to Linux and could not stick with it for even a month and ended up going back to Windows. Although that almost certainly happened for a few. Let's see, CashioS's founder explains why they didn't join the new opening gaming collective. They opted out since we don't see all too much benefit from their side. Handheld stuff is not their major focus. Also, we have some concerns that this could get a bureaucratic loophole, which seem to be more or less true so far. Additionally, to all this initiative looked to all of us, this initiative, I assume this is supposed to be looked like an emergency rushed thing so that Bazite finds new kernel maintainers, and for other technological stuff after kicking the maintainer, which has basically made most of the integration work for them. We neither want to be associated with Playtron 2. So seems like there's some Linux drama here. There are more reasons, but I'll keep them out of the public. For those unfamiliar with Playtron, they made a big splash back in early 2024 when they made a new Linux-based OS gaming while pulling in a number of open source developers. The first and only hardware actually using it appears to be SuPlay 0x1, which has some weird Web3 crypto blockchain stuff, and eventually Playtron announced that their own cryptocurrency back in May of 2025. Playtron haven't announced anything at all since then. So yeah, more drama it seems. Moving on. Trying to rush through all of this. Brings us to GameDeveloper.com articles. Let's see. QA workers at Blizzard ratify union contract with Microsoft. A 3-year contract delivers a generative AI protections, wage increases, disability accommodations, and more. Okay, good news, I suppose. Of course, the problem with these contracts always is as soon as the contracts start to run out, that's where all the shenanigans tend to happen, if shenanigans are going to happen. On the other hand, there are times when the contracts just go fine and contract renegotiations are fairly fine. Unfortunately, in the United States, striking, while you have a valid contract, I do not believe is allowed, but striking also when you don't have a valid contract in place for an increase in wages is also not allowed. And by not allowed, I mean it allows somebody like Microsoft to fire people or lay them off. Whereas there would be more union protections if they're striking for better work conditions and accommodations and things like that. So a lot of these contract negotiations don't singularly focus on just getting more money for people, which is probably a good thing, because getting more money for people just means people waste that money instead of put it into saving things, and so they often will go for like pensions or healthcare, things that will help people in a longer term or just in a better way. I don't know why we're looking at Disney Dreamlight Valley. Still very positive though. You'd think more people were talking about it, would be talking about it. Marvel Rivals is mostly positive at 73%. I don't own GTA for the complete edition. Interesting. I don't know why we're looking at these games. What link would have led me to this? Helldivers 2 is very positive. Guess it's nice to see where we're at. Dead by Daylight, very positive at 81%. Fallout 76 in the last 30 days, not positive, mixed at 61%. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, 90%. Clover Pit, 88% in the last 30 days. Ghost of Tsushima, 94%. Why are we looking at all of these games? And is this why everything was running so slow? Dead Cells would be a good game to get at this point, as I don't believe they're adding any new updates to it. Sword of the Sea composer Austin Wintory wins a Grammy Award. The annual music showcase took place last night in LA. Yeah. And I guess we just leave it at that. I think there was more that was said and done at the Grammys, but I don't think any of it really would have anything to do with video games. And that should bring us to all the new games on Steam. So let's see if we can rush through this fairly quickly. Put that on the fall list. See if any of my Switch yeah, so when I swipe this way, that means I'm leaving the tabs open to potentially make a YouTube short on it. If I'm really interested, I'll put it on the follow list. And if I swipe down, I'm gonna just close the tab, which I'm gonna try to be somewhat critical here, but I think I'm also not going to do a very good job of that. I don't know if the swiping animation here is, that looks like Nick Cage, and that looks like Nick Cage. Yeah, it may very well just not be worth doing the gestures at all, since this is so incredibly slowed down. Everything is overloaded. School Quest is definitely something that looks like an old school point and click adventure, but honestly, I'm not sure that this animation style is acceptable. Even if you are trying to do something retro, you have the idea of retro is something that is relatively new, designed to look older, not something that actually looks older. Particularly in video games, that would mean higher resolution, better fonts. Just something that felt like an old point and click game, not something that just very plausibly was a old point and click game, or is indiscernible from an old point and click game. What's funny is that art style in particular seems to be attempted fairly often, being too retro for retro. I guess that's a great way to potentially describe it. And you know what, I didn't think of this. But if I click this button and then if I close this tab, if that fixed it up, I would be shocked. But that might have been the problem. UI vision, which I had ambitions to get away from UI vision, and I stopped working on those projects, which really, I am just such a bad follow-througher, for lack of a better term. Yeah, that didn't fix it anyways. Where I will start projects and then get 50% of the way through and then get distracted and never finish them, or take way too long to finish them. Yep. Zig jumps in the chat. He says, "Hey, what's up? I had been sick after seeing his combat demo for his game he's developing and hadn't given any feedback, so I directly contacted him and asked him if he wanted my feedback, and then I was just about to give my feedback, which really isn't going to be too much because I am just doing it off the top of my memory. But then I got distracted in earlier today doing other stuff, so yeah, I will have that feedback for Zig probably later this evening. And I don't know how helpful it's really going to be because I suspect he's already a week deep into doing completely different stuff, but who knows? Yeah. I really have just lost an extra week of life this past week by being sick from half of it and snowed in and just kind of incapable of doing something, much of anything. That's an interesting thought. You don't see too many snake men or snakes in general in games. I don't know if there's ever been a Snake Man protagonist or anything like that in a game. I guess if you really think about it, there's probably not been too many games where you are playing as even like zombies or other kinds of monsters. And usually if you are playing as a monster, it is in a fighting game of some sort. But yeah, I was watching a YouTube video talking about the differences between the iZombie comic versus the iZombie CW TV show, which the TV show is completely different from the comic. Well, almost completely different. There's maybe a similar name and character here and there. But yeah, if you were going to make a game where you're playing as a zombie, the first twist and shock and surprise there is that you're playing as a zombie. The bigger challenge certainly is how do you have smaller twists and gimmicks on the inside of that, other than you just are a zombie. This is quite the thumbnail here. Quite the amount of cleavage there. And yeah, I don't know how you really do that. Because you really would have to, sorry, I'm yawning, subvert expectations quite a bit. And I guess the one example that we can point to just show how difficult that would be is Vampire the Masquerade, with the first game being Beloved and then several Vampire the Masquerade sequels. Yeah. This one's not going to support English. There's been several Vampire the Masquerade sequels that have not been well received at all. And we've got several other games. Yeah, Zig says he's been working on world building with his cousin. They've been doing a lot of brainstorming and writing. And they just made a script to allow him to write characters, and you can import them from a comma separated value file. Yeah. I was wondering if his cousin, who said he had done some like film writing, was using something like Final Draft. And it would be interesting to look up to see if Final Draft has a format to export text in comma separated values. Although for video game reasons, there's probably a more industry standard format that's not just a standard CSV that might have, I don't know, different languages and maybe timings for subtitle cues, differences between an audio description, line of dialogue, and a like subtitled dialogue. Definitely know all that localization stuff is a realm where you really would hope that a library exists to assist you with a lot of that. Even I would say most developers handle their localization. They hand all of that over to another team that only specializes in doing that one aspect of localizing dialogue and subtitles and things like that. Yeah. At a certain level, the way Zig animates and the way he was seemingly very much all about the characters and the story, I think it would be very easy for his efforts to make a animated series that could be on the likes of Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, maybe Toonami. I don't really know how adult it really is going to get. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that adult. If those were easy paths of entry, certainly you could have an animated series be beloved online, like something like Has Been Hotel, and then get really, really lucky and over a very long amount of time get funding by somebody like Prime Video to then remake the whole thing more professionally. But yeah, it is a game that's still very much in its early stages, so seeing what the final story is and how it connects to the interactive aspects is something I'm excited to see. Let's see, Zig says he's had a decent amount of development time since the story is less technical. He sunk a lot of time into X4 Foundations. That and Ready or Not, which are other games. He plays other games and is inspired by them. And then he says for the game it has to be more specific, especially since I have different columns that game can read, i.e. XP reward amount, quest giver, etc. Yeah. Yeah. Comma separated values is the simpler format to have different columns and different values, and it's the format that is easy to put into something like Google Sheets or an Excel sheet from Office, Open Office or Microsoft Office, take your pick. But there is an evolution of that is way more fiddly with its formatting in JavaScript objects or JSONs files. JavaScript object notation, I believe, is what that stands for. In which you basically can have nested values, and you can basically have a value and define its definition and be more like a dictionary, which all sounds great, but also wouldn't be something I would want to mess with unless there was a library that was handling JSON files for me at every aspect, every import and export. I would like it to be simple. Yep. Zig says, I've been thinking about using the animations as marketing for the game. He put out a horizontal video, and it looked like it got maybe a dozen or so views. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that, because then he put the horizontal video as private, and then he put out a vertical version of the same video, and it got like 500 views in almost instantaneously. So yeah, the only thing there I'd say is there really wasn't a need to private the horizontal and just double up whenever he does that in the future. And definitely the move should be to make a horizontal and vertical view video. As long as you're making content under 3 minutes, that's always going to be my suggestion. If you're making videos under over 3 minutes, then it might make more sense to just make a horizontal video, but honestly it's probably still makes sense to have a vertical version too, just because you might be able to clip up a vertical version and make it a YouTube short. And even if you don't make it a YouTube short, somebody out there is going to probably still want to look at the vertical versions. Blackjack trainer game. Looks like a mobile game. Then let's see, Zig says, but yeah, animations definitely should be marketing. You also, Zig needs to do this, in my opinion, is he needs to pretty quickly, as his next video probably, make a slight explainer as to what his channel is about and what his game is about, or what he's developing and doing here, particularly his new channel just specifically for his game. Otherwise it is just going to be several videos, and then maybe an explainer of what's going on here, like as he's brainstorming the big picture idea. A story about a person going to college might be enough for that first video, just to say this is what this game is about, a game about going to college. Just really simple teaser type description. I'm developing a game about going to college. Yeah. Then he says he can send me in private a lot of the lore to get some feedback. Sure, I can be somewhat of a critic of stories and lore. I don't know. It's not 100% my forte, but I think I'm pretty good at that too. I've watched enough stories to I've watched enough movies and TV and things like that. I haven't read much at all, so a lot of it might feel brand new to me when it's not. Then, so yeah. And then he said when it's almost solidified, the ending is troubling us a lot. Well, you don't have to explain what happens in the ending of a game, just the general idea of what your channel is about and what you're doing, what the game, that it is a video game in the first place. Just assume some random people are going to stumble upon it and have no clue whatsoever what it's about. And you want to explain that in nice big text on screen or in audio, probably both audio and nice big text on screen. And this is delayed slightly. He says vertical video was 1.4 thousand views. That is a very decent amount of views. And it really goes to show where YouTube will boost a new channel and then the algorithm will start to slow down the number of impressions a older channel gets, particularly if they're putting out vertical. And then he says he didn't want to get in the copyright claim territory. That's why he unlisted it. Well, two things there. If the video is in any format, private, unlisted, public, premiere or not premiere, doesn't matter how it's listed on YouTube. If there is a copyright claim on it, through the automatic detection, it will be automatically detected and you will automatically get struck. If a video is private, someone couldn't find your video as easily and file a manual copyright claim, but that almost never happens. That is basically going completely outside of YouTube's automatic content ID system, finding a video, hiring a lawyer, sending a DMC takedown form out. Almost never happens. If you're thinking that having the exact same two videos on YouTube, one vertical and one horizontal, is going to cause some weird copyright claim where it thinks one of your videos is copying another of your videos, that won't happen at all. If you'd put some music in there that was copyrighted, sure, there's an issue there. Yeah, obviously you don't want to do that, but yeah, I'm putting copyrighted music in a 3-minute YouTube short is only going to slightly increase your odds of not getting caught versus being a 3-minute horizontal video. It's the exact same odds, really, of being caught if there was an actual copyright claim there. So yeah, but yeah, if there was some music in there I didn't recognize it was copyrighted, that would be one reason not to unlist it, but to straight up delete it from your channel. And even then, if you delete it from your channel, that doesn't inherently mean that YouTube won't decide to put a strike on your channel for a video that can't even be counter struck at that point. So it's just really want to be careful not to use anything that's copyrighted. And when it comes to music, you may think it's not copyrighted and YouTube may still disagree with you. That's why a lot of times it's better to go to the YouTube music library and sort by license and find something that is like Creative Commons free open source music and just use that as your background music for artistic creation, specifically for animations on YouTube. Even if the final game has completely different audio in it, it's not crazy for a trailer to have different audio. And then Zig says, when I create content, I always want to be free of copyright stuff. Don't we all? That is definitely true. And frankly, in my long experience of running the YouTube channel, copyright stuff has not been the thing that's been a big deal in recent years. It's much more been for problems with just a flash of a side boob or something. It's been much more censorship issues, which I don't think Zig is going to run into, that has hurt my channel and gotten it deleted a couple times. And it's a lot of times it's just been random stuff too. It's just like there's really no explanation that you're ever going to find as to as far as why they decided to attack your channel at this point, at some random point. Always keep backups. That's the only thing that is really going to keep you protected. Yeah, the number of games I've fully played and then not been able to air content on because of audio copyright it's basically been like 2 in 10 years. It always kind of sucks and it's a shame when it happens. The number of episodes in long-running long plays that have had like 1 or 2 episodes where the audio had to be stripped of the music in the background probably is closer to 30 or 40 out of 10,000 videos. Maybe even if it was like 100 or 200 videos, they really have stopped really caring that much. The vast majority of Content ID claims are people who just want to take the revenue from it. And maybe if I ever got my channel monetized again, I might do a deep dive into looking at how many people are making money off my videos and try and remove some of those Content ID claims. But yeah, if you're advertising your own game, you're not really going to run ads on your advertising of your own game anyways, so you're never really going to be shooting for a level of monetization to begin with. And Zig says, I'm thinking since I'm developing my own IP, intellectual property, I don't want to have copyrighted videos unless I license them. Not sure exactly what he means by that. Inherently, when you create anything creative, you immediately in the United States have a copyright for it. You just haven't filed any of the like forms to register that copyright with the government, which is often a waste of time and money unless you have thousands upon thousands of dollars to pay lawyers to defend your copyright. By putting your videos on YouTube, you're giving them a license to use your copyrighted material, and you're also claiming that you're not inappropriately using anyone else's copyrighted material. which that license is somewhat transferable, where YouTube could use it in their own commercials to highlight YouTube if they wanted to. So yeah. I do understand the general idea of wanting to be on the straight and narrow and not have like Bon Jovi music in the back of your advertisement for your game when there's no chance in the world you're going to actually be able to have Bon Jovi in your game, which is again why my suggestion would just be to go to the music library on YouTube and search by licenses and find the free Creative Commons music to use, at least for YouTube videos, if not just to use them directly in your game. And then you will know that that audio that you can download from the music library from YouTube Studio is already flagged to be acceptable and okay to use on YouTube. Yeah, a content ID thing is so commonplace it's easily ignored. I like the look of this one. I mean, it catches my eye for some reason, but then really there's not a lot here. Alright, so Zig said I got fully demonetized, question mark. What happened is YouTube a few years back changed the requirements to be monetized and kicked out all small content YouTube content creators. It used to be you only needed like 100 subscribers, and I don't know if they even cared about watch time at that point, but if they did care about watch time, it was a much smaller number that I had passed. And so yes, I was monetized on my channel and made, I think, roughly about $100, just barely enough for them to actually send me a check once, before they significantly increased the number of subscribers up to 1,000, which I am just now over 1,000, but then they also significantly increased the amount of watch time one needs to like 4,000 watch hours, I believe, in a rotating 365 days. And yeah, I'm right now rocking about 1,200 watch hours. So yeah, I am fully demonetized at the moment. It would be really helpful, certainly, if I could convince a lot of people to watch a lot of my videos multiple times over to get the watch time up, so I could run just a small amount of ads just for tax purposes, basically. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of that hope that would happen before the end of the year. If it did, it would be great. And who knows, with having 1,000 subscribers now, maybe that would be $1,000 a year. Probably not, because everything I hear says that the ad rates are significantly worse these days too. Yeah. And yeah, if I could get super lucky and I was getting, let's say, $1,000 a month, which is a massive amount for ad revenue, it would probably never happen. That would be super helpful. That would be like life-changing amounts of money if it was specific. And with my channel having so many videos, if it was getting that many views and that much watch time, it would probably snowball. The hope would be that it would snowball, and that would just be a consistent amount of revenue for the rest of my life. If I could get $2,000 a month, that would cover all of my monthly expenses almost, and I would be very comfortable, and I would be fairly happy at that. Like, that not much more changes if we make up an imaginary number up to 4,000 a month. Like, okay, now I'm saving more for retirement, or spending more on healthcare, or something like that. Not too much changes anymore up to 8,000 a month. Yeah, it would have to be a pretty huge amount of money before I hit some other level. Like, sure, if I had an extra $1 million, I would love to build a house, custom built house, but yeah, I don't know why. Then I'd have to decide also where I'd want to build that house. But yeah, outside of just a brand new house built really nicely to a very high level of quality, any extra imaginary money would be like funding businesses or starting some major project, paying a lot of people to accomplish ideas that I have, but I'm just not capable of actually finishing or getting all the way done. Definitely there are ideas I've had that I'd like to see built, but if I don't do it and I don't pay somebody else to do it, it's probably not going to happen. Yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to ideally just get monetized. Just make a little bit of money. Tax-wise, even just like $100 a year means I could potentially write off investing in myself more, building new computers and things like that. Which, yeah, you don't want to go too crazy with that when running a business, but there is something to it. See, this feels like this is almost a direct reaction to Wicked Seed, is now we have Parish Truth. You have these mannequins in sexy poses with TVs on their head. Yeah. There's another way to get monetized. It's also worth pointing out that if you're making YouTube shorts and you're getting like 90 million views, I think is what you need to get to be monetized that way. That is one way to do it, but it basically means you have to be a pretty well established TikToker coming to YouTube for that to happen. I'm not sure I've seen any success stories of people starting new and fresh doing YouTube shorts and actually getting monetized. Whole YouTube thing really is a scam where 99.999% of everybody is going to spend way too much energy for a while trying to make content, making YouTube a more interesting place for people to watch videos, and getting nothing back for their efforts. Where the hand-picked few and the very successful are only the ones that are actually benefit in the success of YouTube. And even then, you have people like Mr. Beast, who has to at least spend a ton of money and effort to make his videos, and also went to Prime Video and made the Beast games, which I assume also highlights just how hard it is to be exclusively a YouTuber. How far are we from being done? This one looks slightly interesting. What's interesting about this is the scale of it. Like, usually when you have a game where a character has a gun, they're zoomed out, or you're looking from the top down, and there's just a lot more opportunity to see something attacking you. Here, this almost feels like, what if it's a point and click game but with a gun? Or at the very least, what it feels like is it is zooming in to give you that cramped, claustrophobic feel of an experience, which I assume means that the zombies in a game like this and the monsters in a game like this are really bullet spongy and very deadly, like potentially one-hit kill type of an experience. In a funny way, I would say the art style here doesn't really match the theme of what's happening, but it's an interesting enough contrast that I would like to see it through. Moving on now. Boy, I've had far too many streams lately where things are not going great, as far as frame drops in particular. I am a sucker for tarot cards. That's one thing they could do, is that there are several artistic challenges that have been done over the years, and once he establishes his main cast of characters, doing some of these artistic challenges, recreating things, some of them with his characters, so different ways he could show off his artistic skill and show off his character designs, and or variants on his character designs. And one of those challenges may very well be to create your own tarot card set, even if you're never actually going to print it and try and sell it, although there is a website that will basically print and sell any tarot card set an artist makes for relatively cheap. But yeah, there's a list I posted on my Discord on one of the subforums, one of the many subforums, I don't remember which. I think I put it under content creation, of different challenges that they've done over the years, and some of them come back. There was at a time, I don't know if it is now the case, a pretty active community amongst artists on things like DeviantArt. I don't know if DeviantArt is really the active place now. Maybe Pixar, maybe there are just specific subreddits one has to seek out as far as Reddit. Heck, there is even a small possibility that Dig is coming back into being relevant, and so there even could be some other forums that have the larger amounts of artists talking to each other. And there are several sub groups of artists too. So yeah, if one group doesn't seem attractive, I'm sure you can eventually seek out another. I know that there's a Kadokawa, I believe it is doing a contest where you make your own manga, which they would basically use as a way of making something that they could sell if you win. So yeah, those are different ways to find different communities. Not too different from the game jams that game developers use. My only real concern about game jams was sticking within the same itch.io groups on that were posting game jams, or the same group of people, or doing only game jams, and not really growing past that. And yeah, there's, I would argue, slight differences in actively going to find other groups to promote and self-promote yourself, but also to join a group, which the vast majority of these groups will say no self-promotion, and you'll still dance around that and self-promote somewhat. But yeah, there's a difference from that and then just hanging out with the group and never actually creating anything that is more of a final product. Man, there's a lot of games. Looks like we're almost done. Zig says, yeah, I was thinking about thinking my HD backgrounds or other art style stuff. I don't know, I have thought about a lot of things, as I most likely would like to receive funding for the game development in some form, rewards for backers or publisher stuff. Well, if you're gonna get publishers funding, which is definitely not a terrible idea, you're gonna need a portfolio of sort, a dev bible basically, and an artistic portfolio. And certainly, as someone who is very artistically adept, an artistic portfolio makes a lot of sense too. So getting all of that in one place where people can see makes some sense. Creating relationships in particular is a great way to meet the right people that will give you money, instead of just getting money from a publisher who could very easily be the wrong person and might very well lead to disaster. Certainly for your first game, you're not going to be proven to be able to finish a game and make it a success, so it's going to be a lot tougher to get funding in that case too. As far as rewards go, I think winning artistic contests and things like that are going to give you small amounts of money, not really enough that would significantly change the direction of the development of a game. They're nice to get, certainly, but frankly the award is going to be more valuable than a cash prize. Proving yourself more and more as being able to finish a project is better ways to certainly get backers for something like Kickstarter, and getting people to back you on Patreon as you're just developing is very much going to be a personality based thing, just getting people to like you and want to support you. So yeah, there's lots of different avenues there, and almost all of it centers around being a people person, which is probably a great reason why I would be terrible if I owned a game company, because I just wouldn't have that management level to be able to meet people and make them like me and want to support me enough. Yeah, artistic portfolio and game development portfolio, keep them somewhat separate, but be ready to show them off and possibly just have them publicly to view. Zig says, well, good news is I have a bounty of things to show by the time I ask for funding. I've been making a paper trail for a while. Yep, the more the better. Like, that's one of the things that irritates me about Westerners compared to Asians, Japanese people, is that like Japanese kids draw Gundams when they're like 4 years old and they don't stop drawing in ever. Like, so you'll have like 30-year-old business people who still occasionally will draw, and they'll just have potentially decades of experience that they can show off as far as being good at drawing. Whereas in the United States, I was probably asked to draw in kindergarten, and then at no point was I asked to or encouraged to draw anything ever again. Maybe I took an art class and probably wasn't even asked to draw on that. Like, it's just not enough practice, and certainly it's not enough output. Like, I have maybe in my entire lifetime 4 or 5 things I've drawn that I still have, and I'm not even 100% going to say I'm 100% proud of them, but I have them, and that's the best I can do. But yeah, so like when PewDiePie did that challenge where he was going to draw something for like an hour every day or something like that, I don't know what the actual challenge was. I mean, that just really goes to show how much drawing a drawing artist needs to do. Same is true for anybody who's doing it digitally. Same is true for anybody who's painting. Same is true for anyone who's singing. In the West, they are better about encouraging people to sing and be in bands, but only a little bit better. Mostly because it's connected to sports. Yeah, Zig said that he might give away some of his original arts as rewards for Kickstarter backers if he chooses that route. Yeah, particularly like digital rewards for art is certainly something. Right, so we seem like we probably only have a couple. Well, we might actually have a lot more than I think we do. But we've got a Gaming on Linux article here. His most played games on Steam Deck for January 2026. And it doesn't even want to really scroll down. The list is not too different. Zig says he doesn't know if he told me this, but I had attempted a Kickstarter once before it failed horribly. I also had basically nothing to show, just an idea. Yeah, well, Kickstarters often do fail. There's really no problem, as I see it, for somebody to have a failed Kickstarter. The only real problem is when somebody has a fully funded Kickstarter and it feels a little scammy and they don't deliver. Yeah. Zig says, from his research, if he chooses the route of a Kickstarter, people should say I should have a following of at least 1,000 for a successful campaign. Yeah. It's all about getting people to like you, getting people to know who you are. Kickstarter is definitely not the first step, in my opinion. You should be making YouTube fans, you should be finding other forums, whether it's Reddit or otherwise, just finding similar artists, complimenting other artists, and truly trying to befriend other artists. Friends like to do other friends favors, certainly. And then Patreon is probably the middle step once you start to have a following. And then Kickstarter really should be like almost right before the launch could happen for a game in particular. Because yeah, certainly it's much more reasonable to launch a Kickstarter and say the game is already done, we just need this, we're just doing this for pre-orders. That's usually when you get your best success for video games. See, GameDeveloper.com says there's a report that Ashes of Creation developer Intrepid Studio is shut down. I think we had talked about this before. If not, I'm just going to leave it at the headline. And it says flawless cleanup, but then we've got several older games here. Yep. And this would be the flawless cleanup, but I'm not going to do any of that. No More Sky. Megamonk, still very positive. That says end of the show. Then I've got several more games here. Just how many extra tabs were open today, and how much was that really dragging performance of my computer? Where did all these tabs come from? And this is a long list of pretty popular games. Alright, well, yeah, that wasn't that many extra tabs, so that wasn't causing the performance issues today. I don't know what was. I'm gonna just reset my computer and hope it fixes it. Alright, nice talking to Zig once again, and I know we're on a delay, so he might say something, but I'm ending the recording here. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.